Hi.
Hello there. We're on page 563 of In Search of Christian Freedom, An Appealing Promise Unfulfilled. And in this subhead, he's talking about the fruit of faith and his own experience in international work and meeting Jehovah's Witnesses leaders in various contexts. Ray says, the same year that I left the Dominican Republic to become part of the international headquarters staff, President Noor assigned me as one of 4 instructors to conduct special classes of a kingdom ministry course, which the traveling overseers, that is circuit and district, of the U.S. would attend. The classes were 2 weeks in length, and the men came in successive groups of 100 per group. I was surprised how well one could get to know 100 men in 2 weeks of class discussion. And I was equally disturbed to realize that out of any group I never found more than 2 or 3 rather, who gave evidence of any real depth of understanding, of insight, or, more seriously, of spirituality. The other 97 or 98 were essentially company men, whose service talks manifested some oratorical ability, but in content had incredibly little of spiritual nourishment, often being scarcely more than pep talks. Men who were generally effective at placing literature at the doors, and who in knowledge were above average only in their being very up-to-date on society policy and regulations. At the time, I was myself still a firm believer, convinced that I was part of God's one-approved people on earth. Yet I remember saying to myself, is this really the best that we can give our brothers to help them?
The Spirit radiated in speech, attitude, and action by those who put faith in a human system is not the heavenly Spirit from God. It reflects a different, earthly source. They may be quick to punish any deviation from organizational norms and dogma. But if they see serious wrongs committed by their religious organization itself, or recognize crucial fallacies in its teachings, they find neither the inner strength nor the courage to speak out and defend what is right, to stand up for truth or against injustice. Instead of producing persons of integrity, their implicit trust and near total subservience to an organizational system and a fear of losing its approval converts them into emasculated men. Had all of Jehovah's people of pre-Christian times been like this, there would have been no prophets from whose lives and words we might draw strength and assurance when facing tests of our faith in God rather than in human sources. Nor would there have been Christian apostles who, accused of disrupting the peace of the religious community and undermining the authority of its leadership, would stand before the religious governing body of their people and say, we cannot speak about the things we have seen and heard. We must obey God rather than men.
I think we should reread that. We cannot stop speaking about the things we have seen and heard.
Oh, I said it wrong.
We cannot stop speaking about the things we have seen and heard. We must obey God rather than men. How many times?
Oh, you use that one all the time.
Did we hear it?
Mm-hmm.
In later times, there would have been no historical accounts of men like Wycliffe, Tyndale, Servetus, Hus, Waldo, and others who placed conscience above conformity to religious authority, and who paved the way, in greater or smaller measure, to certain freedoms we today enjoy. None of this is said in a spirit of either judgmentalism or scorn. Personal experience brought home to me the crippling effect that faith in a human organization produces, the weakening effect subservience to human authority has, the ease with which concern to not get out of favor with that authority can subtly infiltrate one's thinking. To free myself from those effects did not come easily. I am satisfied that natural courage does not provide the strength one needs. Persons have faced great peril at the hands of outside opposers in order to be loyal to their religious organization, have even risked their lives in enemy surroundings, on behalf of other fellow members of the religion. But that courage of itself gives no guaranteed protection against moral cowardice within that religious organization. Ultimately, how much meaning or merit is there to it if a man takes an uncompromising stand on a certain issue, perhaps spends time in a concentration camp for doing so, and then, when faced with a parallel issue within his religion, now compromises?
What genuine significance is there in a person's refusing to engage in conduct that he views as virtually idolizing of a political state, placing faith in it and giving it near blind allegiance, refusing to make statements that he considers as implying that one's salvation is inextricably connected with that political state, if he then engages in conduct that reflects the virtual idolizing of a religious system, placing in it and giving it near blind allegiance, as believing that his salvation is unquestionably tied in with it. Not all witnesses reach that point, but an incredibly large number do, and the message they receive persistently and insistently leads them in that direction. None of us has cause to boast in his own strength or in the strength of a human system. Faith in God, not faith in the national organization of Israel or in any human leadership, is what distinguished exemplary men of biblical times, whose weakness was turned to strength. I think it is safe to say that the great majority of Watchtower affiliates know how to flow along with the crowd, but would find it difficult to function spiritually apart from a human system. Apart from it, they would feel adrift, disoriented, and with no real goal in life or the strength to strive for it. If their faith were unadulterated, centered wholly in God rather than largely in men, that would not be the case.
I'm glad that he cites persons like Wycliffe, Tyndale, Servetus, Hus, Waldo. That you do hear some of these names, maybe all of those names, those specific names, in Watchtower literature, and you have very little knowledge of them, except that somehow you have the impression they stood up against the tide of authority in their own day.
Right.
But I wish he'd included some of the more recent names. It's easy to find these names that are relatively obscure, who don't even know what they believed in the past, because we did trip over them in Watchtower literature. But when it comes to recent times, there's a gap, it would seem, from the Reformation to the days of Charles Russell in a witness's perception of the past. So we wanted to link to some videos we've done on that period, namely on William Wilberforce, a video called Wilberforce, Wheat and Weeds, tracing some of the influence of this man who's totally ignored in the Watchtower literature. And then also Jonathan Edwards, who is also a name that's obscure to you, but he's only 100 years before Charles Russell. What was God doing through such men in those days to counter the secular drift of society and the authoritarian nature of much religion back in the 18th century and earlier than that? So those videos are on your screen, and the next subhead is the fruitage of hope.